The phone lines are open, so call in and join the conversation at 623-1330.
Thank you for staying tuned. If you've just tuned in, my name's Renee Giacchino. I'm Corporate Counsel for the Center for Individual Freedom. To learn more about my organization or to listen to the conversations that we have right here, the interviews that are conducted here on WEBY, please visit our website at www.cfif.org, where we post the podcast version of many of the interviews conducted right here. As I mentioned before we went to break, joining me now on the program is Ashton Ellis. Ashton is the author of a book that just came out very appropriately on July the 4th. It's titled Refounding America, a Field Manual for Patriot Activists. Ashton, thanks so much for joining us.
Well, I'm glad to be here, Renee. Thanks.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm basically a conservative activist since college. I went to school in Texas and was the chapter chairman for the Young Conservatives of Texas, the Baylor chapter. I went to law school and came out even more conservative after being through quite a few liberal classes with students, and just see this as an opportunity to really take back America from all the folks out there that have been elected the last two cycles. As you know, in 2006 and 2008, we've had a lot of Democrats, and they've pretty much turned the country into something that we haven't ever seen before, which is taking us pretty much to socialism.
Now, you mention in the beginning portion of your book, you propose that it's not just the Democrats who are going to suffer in November, that both political parties will lose in November. If that's the case, then who wins?
Well, we're hoping that limited government types win, and if that's the case, then the Constitution wins. The problem that we see are actually called progressives. They're not liberals. They're not conservatives. They're really in both parties. And when you get to D.C., it's the people that run both parties. These are the folks that vote in bipartisan fashions to raise taxes, spend more money than we have, and increase the size of the federal government.
And in the book, you talk about how our chance to save our country is rapidly approaching. Is that November 2nd?
It is indeed. In fact, it might be the last best chance we've got to really change the tide, because if President Obama retains a majority of progressives in Congress, they've already shown an ability to take over entire sections of the American economy. If we don't stop them in 2010, then it might not matter by the time we get to 2012.
You mentioned in the book that progressives are afraid of, quote, us. You know, they're afraid of the patriots.
Okay.
If that's the case, then why aren't they listening? Ego?
Well, part of it's ego. I mean, one of the things that's just come out, there was a Politico.com poll that came out last week that mentioned that progressives are pretty much hidebound. They're on the coastal elite. They're in Washington, D.C., and for them and their friends, life is going pretty well. So it's part of it's not listening because they don't really see how their policies are affecting most people. Most progressives, for instance, look at the people around Barack Obama. They've worked at nonprofits that get government funding. They've worked in public institutions that get government funding. Or they work in academia, which most of those get government funding. Or in politics. They've never really worked in the private sector, so they don't understand things like profit and loss, risk and reward. So a lot of it is they don't even understand how much they're affecting millions of people's lives for the worse.
Ashton, your book, it's titled Refounding America, a Field Manual for Patriot Activists. How do you define a patriot?
Well, I define a patriot as someone who is an everyday American, someone who wakes up every morning, takes care of their family, works hard at their job, whether they like it or not, and tries to live a good, law-abiding life. You know, they're not only proud of their country when their party's in power or when things are going well necessarily, but they're just in there day in and day out. And in this electoral environment, they're tired of people who don't love the country every day, who do only take pride whenever they're on top, and they want to return to sensible, common-sense government by people who actually like the country.
How does that fit in, and is patriot activists another term for Tea Party activists?
Well, part of it. one of the reasons we named our book Refounding America was because we think that the people that go to the Tea Party protests and are part of the 9/12 groups are only the two most public faces of a much larger movement that we think is trying to refound America. It's the millions of people who may or may not attend those events, but give their assent to them, that they agree to them. It's the friend that nods their head when you talk to them at the water cooler at work. It's the family member who understands where you're coming from at the, at a Sunday gathering or something like that. It's the people that Rasmussen polls captured in May when they found that 54% of Americans identify with the Tea Party movement. Not necessarily that they go to a weekly meeting or even go to protests, but that they identify with the limited government, spending within our means message that the Tea Party stands for.
In the opening pages of your book, you welcome the reader to the Second American Revolution. How are we going to win this, Ashton?
Well, it starts in 2010 with electing a strong freshman class of congresspeople and senators that are willing to say everything begins and ends with the Constitution. We have to start the conversation not on whether it's an important issue, but whether it's constitutionally permitted for the federal government to be involved. There's a lot of different levels of government that can deal with problems. And my co-author and I think that the fundamental problem with America right now is that the federal government never sees a problem it doesn't think it can fix.
How did we lose that connection, as you refer to it in the book Refounding America? How did we lose the connection between modern public policy and the founders' philosophy of limited, effective government? How and when, I guess, take me first.
Well, one of the unique aspects about our book is that we try to give people first principles at the beginning and then kind of the applied nature of how to find other people, build coalitions, and change elections by electing good candidates towards the end of the book. And the progressive movement really starts with the Republican Party and Teddy Roosevelt back at the turn of the last century. What happened with Teddy Roosevelt is he so expanded the government's idea of its responsibility to take care of every American citizen for every problem that they have, that it became kind of a governing philosophy for both parties. And it was picked up by Woodrow Wilson back in the 1910s, and it's really been basically the governing philosophy for both parties up until the present day. And we see that with even Republicans like George W. Bush, who in certain ways massively expanded the role of the federal government in social welfare programs and in things like education. And now Obama's doing it with things like health care. I think you mentioned cap and tax earlier in the show, and a host of other issues.
Are you aware of how many patriot activist groups there are nationwide?
Well, it kind of depends on how you want to count them.
Okay.
But there are tens of thousands of local Tea Party chapters. Now, they're affiliated with different national groups, but really you can find a Tea Party chapter within 10 miles of just about anywhere you live in America. In fact, you can probably find up to 2 or 3. We've actually got a strategy in the book for how to find other people that believe in constitutional limited government. And it's surprising because a lot of these groups are in very blue, i.e. progressive areas. And with the internet, you can actually find like-minded people in some of the most anti-liberty places in the country.
Well, I know locally here, I believe it's around August 21st. I think it is on August 21st. There is a Tea Party rally going to be held in Fort Walton Beach. And I've seen ads for a much larger Tea Party rally that Glenn Beck is putting together up in Washington, D.C. on, I believe, August the 28th. Is that right?
That's correct. It's also in sponsorship with freedomworks.org.
Okay. Your book, one of the most interesting things that you've done with the book Refounding America, you and your co-author Terry Easton, that you've done with that, the Field Manual for Patriot Activists, is made it incredibly interactive for the person who purchases this book. You know, a lot of times you buy a book, you read the book, you put it down, you're done. Such is not the case. You know, even if you go back and you flip through and refer to it again,